A nurse unexpectedly receives a letter from a former patient, and inside, hidden between the lines, is a love confession that was never spoken. The dim yellow glow of a desk lamp spilled across the old wooden surface. Inside the small silent room, everything was drowned in an almost suffocating stillness. The wall clock ticked steadily. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each beat pressing deeper into the sense that time itself had slowed to something unnatural. She sat there in a thin sweater, her shoulders trembling from the cold. Her breath escaped in faint white wisps, dissolving into the air. On the table, her hand shook as it clutched a worn envelope. Its edges were yellowed with age, its corners frayed as though it had traveled a long, uncertain road before arriving here. Her heart pounded at first steady, then faster, then thunderous. The sound filled her ears, drowning out the ticking clock. She couldn't bring herself to open it. She only stared at the uneven handwriting scrawled across the front. The ink had blurred in places, but 4 words still stood out, trembling, whispering. To the nurse I once loved. Her eyes widened, her throat went dry, breath caught in her chest. For that single moment, the entire room froze. Wind slipped through the window, making the candle flicker, casting warped shadows across the wall. She gripped the envelope tighter, as if afraid it might vanish from her hands. Memories flashed. The sterile white hallways of a hospital. The click of rubber soles on tile. Fleeting glances exchanged in passing. A weak, trembling voice calling her name in the darkness. And then, silence. She blinked, pulled back into the present. Her fingers traced the brittle seal, trembling. She eased it open. The sound of tearing paper filled the room, sharp, haunting in the silence. Rip! The envelope parted. Inside lay a letter neatly folded. The paper had yellowed, thinned by time. She drew it out with shaking hands, as if holding something too fragile, too precious that a single wrong move might shatter it. She inhaled deeply, closed her eyes, then opened them. The first line appeared before her, shaky, but heavy enough to crush her chest. If you're reading this, then I'm no longer here. Her heart stopped. Her breath fractured. Her throat locked. Her eyes shimmered, though no tears had fallen yet. The room seemed to shrink around her. The walls pressed closer. The ceiling dropped lower. The air thickened heavy, leaving only the sound of paper trembling in her hands and the deafening rhythm of her racing heart. She wanted to read on, but she was terrified. Terrified that each word would carve another wound into her soul. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the letter. Her eyes quivered as they followed the second line. Then the third. The clock kept ticking. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each strike like a funeral bell. A sudden gust rushed through the window, making the candle flare, throwing fractured light across her tear-streaked face. And then, the camera froze. The frame locked on a single tear falling onto the page, smudging the words she had yet to read. A trembling voiceover cut through the silence. What would you do if one day you received a letter from a patient long ago? Someone who once loved you. The screen darkened. Only the sound of a heartbeat remained. Fast, then slowing, then silence. The fluorescent lights stretched endlessly across the hospital corridor ceiling, their harsh white glow never dimming. They banished every shadow, yet in doing so cast the place in an air of coldness, distance. The pale green paint on the walls had begun to peel. The polished tiles on the floor reflected the hurried footsteps of doctors, nurses, and anxious families. The hospital had its own never-ending symphony, the steady beep, beep, beep of monitors, the squeak of carts rolling down the halls, the distant echo of names called over the intercom. Somewhere muffled sobs broke the rhythm. The sharp smell of disinfectant clung to the air, stinging the nose of anyone who entered. Sometimes it mingled with the stale scent of leftover night shift coffee, or the faint aroma of thin porridge carried in by a worried relative. In this world, she walked with quiet familiarity. Her hair tied neatly back, her white blouse slightly wrinkled from endless shifts. Her gentle face bore lines of exhaustion, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, yet still carrying a glint of quiet resilience. She had given nearly all of her youth to this place. Each time friends invited her out, she would smile faintly and say, "I'm on the night shift." Birthdays, movies, even the chance for something like love, all of it set aside, replaced by the constant call of the emergency ward. Her work was a closed loop, morning rounds with medicine, midday blood pressure checks, evening IV drips, nights spent by patients' bedsides. Yet within this cycle, she found meaning. A weak nod of thanks, a fragile smile from a patient, those moments were her reward, strong enough to erase her fatigue. One late afternoon, sunlight filtered through the glass window into room 207. He was there. A thin man, shoulders hunched, skin pale from illness. His frail hand rested on the white sheet. But his eyes were different, warm in a way words couldn't capture. He didn't speak much. Whenever she entered, he simply followed her with his gaze. Their first meeting had been under dim yellow light after his surgery. The monitor beeped softly. She leaned over to adjust the IV line, her hand brushing his arm. His eyes fluttered open, tired yet grateful. She smiled, barely noticeable but real. From that night on, his gaze always lingered on her whenever she walked through the door. Day by day, something silent grew between them. No words, only glances. Only the brush of fingers as she handed him medicine or the quiet nod he offered when their eyes met. Sometimes he managed a fragile smile, trembling, weak, but enough to stir something in her chest. One night, long past midnight, room 207 lay dark except for the dim glow of the bedside lamp. She entered quietly. He wasn't asleep. His eyes were fixed on the fogged window. At the sound of her steps, he turned. They looked at each other. No words, just the faint skip of her heartbeat echoing in the silence. Little gestures became unspoken rituals. He would glance toward the door at the sound of nurse's footsteps. She would adjust his blanket even if it didn't need fixing. He would whisper thank you voice, faint as a breath. She would smile in return, her silence saying, it's nothing. But there were harder nights too. One evening his fever spiked. The monitor screamed, beep, beep, beep. She rushed in panic, tightening her chest. His pulse raced, his breathing shallow. His trembling hand gripped her wrist so tightly it burned. In his fever-clouded eyes she saw fear, yes, but also something else. A desperate longing as if begging her not to leave. The moment passed, the doctor arrived. The fever broke. His hand released hers. She walked away in silence. But that grip, that warmth lingered like a mark carved deep within her. Time passed. He remained in room 207. She remained at his side. They never shared long conversations, but in the silence something unspoken had taken root. A fragile love, unnamed, unacknowledged. She never allowed herself to dream. He was still a patient. She was still a nurse. Between them stood an invisible wall. And yet, each time his gaze caught hers, that wall seemed to tremble. One late afternoon, she entered the room to find him writing. A small weathered notebook rested in his hands. Its leather cover was worn, the corners frayed. She glimpsed the fresh ink on the page, but he quickly closed it, offering only a soft smile and a quiet shake of his head. In his eyes was something hidden, a secret. Perhaps the beginning of a letter that would never be sent. The notebook lay there, old leather, cracked, paper edges curling. His thin fingers hovered over the page, hesitant, trembling. The faint scratch of pen against paper, then silence. But the words he wrote that day would only reach her much later. Night fell over the hospital like a cold sheet. The fluorescent lights still burned, but everything seemed to recede, thinning into mist. The corridor stretched long and sterile, the polished floor gleaming. Thin blades of light spilled from under the doors of patient rooms, sharp as knives. From room 207 came the steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor, each tone cutting through the air like a taut thread. He lay on his side body, curled slightly to ease his breathing. His frail hand rested on the blanket bones, jutting veins shifting faintly whenever he tried to move a finger. A night breeze slipped through the small window, stirring the curtain. The smell of disinfectant mingled with the damp, musty scent of the old notebook resting on the bedside table, together forming a thin, acrid trace that clung to memory. She passed through the doorway like a streak of white light, her head tilted slightly, the name tag on her chest swinging with her steps. Dark circles shadowed her tired eyes after another endless shift. Her footsteps were quiet, but he heard them. His eyes closed, then opened again. He wanted to say her name, to whisper something simple, thank you, or are you tired, but his throat was dry, his chest tight. The words faltered, then died. Not because of illness, because of fear. Fear of the little time he had left. Fear that if he let her know, if he allowed this feeling to take shape, they would both carry a burden too heavy to put down. She checked his temperature, adjusted the IV drip. The faint sting of alcohol brushed the air, cool and sharp. The bedside lamp bent low, casting warm yellow light across his sweat-dotted forehead. She looked into his eyes. A moment. So brief. Yet warmth slipped between them. He smiled, weak, awkward. She gave the slightest nod. Professional, polite, yet her heart stuttered. Then she turned away, her footsteps soft as she left. The door eased shut behind her. He remained. Only the machine's rhythm. Only silence. Slowly he raised his hand, reaching toward the empty air where she had just stood. There was nothing there but absence. Yet he held it suspended as though even emptiness carried a trace of warmth. Morning light spilled through the frosted window, laying pale rectangles across the floor. She entered with a tray of medicine. Today was blood test day. He leaned back against the pillow, already weary. She told him to make a fist. He obeyed, his thin arm tightened, veins rising beneath fragile skin. She swabbed with alcohol, then slid the needle in. A drop of deep red welled up, slowly crawling into the waiting vial. He almost said, "You..." Stopped. She looked up. "Yes." He swallowed. Nothing. Just, it's a beautiful day. The words fell between them, awkward, misplaced. She smiled politely, professionally, tore a strip of tape, pressed it over the puncture. Don't bend your arm too much. He nodded, unable to hold her gaze. The words he longed to say were trapped somewhere dark behind his ribs, impossible to drag into the light. At noon, she brought a tray of watery food, soup, and porridge. He had no appetite, but she sat down, lifted the tray, and fed him slowly. The spoon clinked faintly against porcelain, delicate as rain against glass, mingling with the machine's steady rhythm. Each swallow burned his throat like a hidden blade. She was patient, unhurried. At times, she lifted her eyes and caught his. He wanted to say, "Don't trouble yourself," or "Thank you for your patience," or even, "I'm afraid I won't have time." But silence. Again silence. The spoon moved back and forth, a quiet rhythm. Time thickened heavy as cotton. By late afternoon, a violent cough tore through the room. His body curled, racked with spasms. His face drained of color, the veins in his neck bulging. She rushed in, steadying his back, raising the bed, pulling the oxygen mask closer. The machine screamed higher. Beep, beep, urgent, chaotic. He gripped the blanket's edge, knuckles white. His eyes locked onto hers. In that moment, everything else vanished. Only her. He wanted to speak, to say it, anything. But the cough crushed his chest, breaking words into fractured gasps. She pressed her palm gently over his trembling hand. Warm, firm, steady. Breathe with me. Deep, slow. Follow my hand. He obeyed. Inhale, slow. The beeps began to fall back into rhythm. She withdrew her hand, took a step back. He raised his eyes, still wet from the fit. He gave the faintest nod. Lips forming the words, "Thank you." She nodded, offering him a small, quiet smile, then turned and left. The door clicked shut. The sound in the room dropped a notch. He sank back against the pillow, empty, exhausted. The feeling inside him, like a drop of ink on paper, barely touched the surface before the pen cap snapped shut. His hand reached for the notebook. The blank page stared back at him, terrifying in its purity. Because on something so white, any word written would feel like a confession. And confessions always carry a price no one can predict. The nurse's break room was small. A microwave, a hot water kettle, plastic lunchboxes stacked in the fridge, each marked with a name in black marker. She pulled out her own cold rice, a few vegetables, a couple pieces of dried meat. The sharp hospital disinfectant clung to everything, even the food. She ate quickly, eyes flicking to her phone screen, blinking with unread messages. Movie tonight. Don't forget Lan's wedding this weekend. Try to come. Honey Mom needs you to take the little one to his checkup tomorrow. Her fingers typed fast. Sorry, I'm on shift. Then the screen went black. She leaned back against the wall, shoulders heavy. On the other side of the tiles, a cart rattled past its wheels, squeaking like some metallic cricket. The head nurse walked in, setting a stack of charts on the table. Her voice was steady, clipped. Room 203, bandage change. Room 207, monitor, breathing through the night. If there's any escalation, call the doctor on duty immediately. She nodded, mechanical, precise. Life here had no space for vagueness. I work. I do it right. I keep my distance. The invisible line was like a rope binding her tightly to reality. She knew she could never step across. Night fell, another shift. She stood in the supply room reviewing the medication board. Neon light poured cold over rows of glass vials. The smell of alcohol was everywhere, soaking into her hair, her hands, her collar. She looked down at her fingers, knuckles dry and cracked from too much sanitizer. She closed her eyes for a moment, and in that flicker of darkness, his face rose up. His eyes, his faint nod, the way his hand clutched the blanket during a coughing fit. Tiny fragments of him pulled at her, tugging her past the line she had drawn for herself. She opened her eyes, straightened her back, exhaled. Back to work. Back to the list of medicines. Back to the next check. Back to the silent steps leading her toward room 207. She would not think further. She would not allow herself to think further. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Room 207. The bedside lamp glowed its warm yellow, softening his pallor, though the hollows in his cheeks remained sharp. She pressed the stethoscope to his chest. The sound of his heartbeat echoed back, thin, brittle. Shifting slightly, she murmured, "Breathe in, hold, now exhale." The room sat at 19 degrees. The chill clung to her wrist. The old notebook on the bedside table gave off its faint, acrid paper smell. He tilted his head toward her lips, closed eyes steady. She jotted a few lines into her chart, then glanced up, caught in his gaze. A silence, long, too long. It stretched taut like a string that might snap into sharp sound with the slightest touch. How are you feeling? Better. Any pain? Not much. I'm on duty tonight. If you need anything, call. He nodded, fell back into silence. She turned away. He watched. His hand gripped the blanket-edge knuckles whitening. The vein at his neck pulsed. His throat trembled. A word broke free. You. She stopped, turned back. What did you say? His lips closed. He shook his head. Nothing. She studied him longer than protocol allowed. Longer than simple courtesy. Something flickered, understanding maybe, or warning. Then she nodded gently, safely, as though closing a door left half open. Get some rest. She left. The door clicked shut. Beep, beep. Steady once more. He released the blanket. His hand fell limp onto the sheet. The tears retreated inward. They did not fall. Could not fall. His eyes traced the ceiling, counting each white square, counting each beep, counting each set of footsteps in the corridor. In a hospital where the lights never go out, darkness can still be found. At the far end of this corridor, the on-call doctor's room spilled a pale green light. She leaned against the doorway, listening as the doctor spoke quickly about the afternoon's test results. His voice was low, flat, clinical. Progress is slow, but irreversible. If there's a complication, focus on pain and respiratory support. Tell the family to prepare. That word prepare fell into her stomach like a stone. She nodded. Yes, doctor. The notebook in her hand slipped slightly. She pressed it into her palm to keep it from falling. Back in the nurse's station, she stared at the duty roster. Her name filled almost every slot. No room for what-ifs. No room for feelings caught between the lines of endless tasks. She sat down, opened her pen to write, but her hands froze above the page. What more could she write for someone slowly slipping out of reach? She closed the notebook, tilted her head back toward the ceiling, forced her breath steady, then stood. Time to check the rooms. Night. Rain. Droplets struck the window pane, streaking downward in trembling trails. Inside room 207 was dim and warm. He struggled to sit upright, each breath catching. She entered carrying a dry towel. Are you all right? I'm fine. She moved closer, laid the towel on the sill, and wiped away the water that had seeped through. The rain makes the room damp. Tomorrow I'll request to move your bed farther from the window. He almost said no need, as long as I can still see you. But he didn't. The words knotted inside him like a rope around his chest. If he pulled them free, the rope would only tighten. She turned back and found him looking at her, directly. No deflection, no detour. She froze for a moment. Just long enough for them both to see what daylight always forced under the white cloth of reason. She pressed her lips together. Get some rest. You. He tried again. Yes, thank you. She smiled. Sleep. She walked out. He watched until the door closed behind her. The next day, the monitor in room 207 quickened. The doctor increased the pain medication. His eyes grew hazier, the moments of clarity shorter. She adjusted his blanket, changed the IV line. She began to notice his breathing. The inhale stretched longer than normal, the exhale forced ragged. Sliding her hand beneath his pillow to raise his head, her fingers brushed the edge of his ear, cold. She pulled back instinctively. The boundary. It had to remain. She stepped half a pace away. Are you in pain? Not much. You're lying. A thin smile curved his lips. Yes. She slipped the elastic band from her hair and placed it around his wrist. Squeeze this when it hurts. He looked at the band. Blue. Soft. Cheap. Yet to him it was something that had touched her. What about you? I still have a few more. She turned away. He kept watching. His hand closed around the band, lightly at first, then tighter. That night, a family wept in the room next door. Their muffled sobs pressed through the thin walls, reaching his ears. His chest clenched not from fear of death, but from fear of running out of time, of losing even one more second in her gaze. He pulled the notebook closer, opened it. Yesterday's page blank. The day before blank. The day before that still blank. He gripped the pen. The tip touched the paper, leaving a single drop of ink. He wrote one word, then stopped. Sweat beaded on his temple. His wrist trembled. You. Just that. One word. He set the pen down, breathed, closed his eyes. Midnight. She walked down the darkened corridor, one hand brushing the cold steel railing to steady her steps. Wind slipped through the cracks of the door, sharp and biting. Her eyes stung. Not from fatigue, but from something she couldn't name. She sank into a plastic chair in the corner, slowly counting her breaths. Her hand opened, then closed. The lines on her palm felt etched by alcohol and sanitizer. Her phone buzzed. A message from a friend. What time are you coming? He said he'll wait at the old cafe. She stared at it. Didn't reply. Rose to her feet. Her soles ached inside the worn flats, the lining long gone. Yet when her hand touched the handle of room 207, it felt like coming home. She pushed the door open. He was asleep. The bedside lamp still glowed warm. The notebook lay slightly open. She stepped closer, wanted to adjust the blanket, to draw the curtain back, to do something to shorten the distance between them. She lingered 1 second, 2, then pulled a chair and sat, silent, listening only to her own heartbeat. Light, then heavy, then light again. She didn't touch the notebook, didn't glance at the page. She was afraid. Afraid of seeing her name written there, afraid of not seeing it, afraid of everything that might already be spelled out in ink. Because once a thing is named, it begins to demand, and she could not allow that. Dawn. The alarm shattered the silence. Beep, 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 sharp, urgent. She shot up, sprinted into the room. He clutched his chest, eyes wide, frantic. Air in, air out. Not enough, never enough. She dragged the oxygen tank closer, fitted the mask over his face. Breathe deep. Look at me. Right here. Her voice steady, though her heart hammered. His hand gripped the blanket, tight, tighter. His eyes searched, searching, finding. She held his gaze. I'm here. His breathing slowed. 1 second, 2, 10. The monitor steadied. Beep, beep, returning to rhythm. Her hand eased back, but his grip on the blanket did not release. So she placed her hand over his. His skin burned, trembling faintly beneath her touch. You're okay now. He looked at her. Lips trembling, shaping the words, don't leave. She froze, a heartbeat suspended. Then she nodded. I'm here. She sat on the edge of the bed. His grip on the blanket loosened at last. Her hand remained resting on his. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't allowed. But the night was long, and people are always at their weakest in hours like these. The sun rose late after the rain. Pale light slipped through the clouds, scattering across the floor, catching on dust suspended in the air. He was awake. She had already switched shifts but hadn't left. She stood at the doorway, watching him take a few spoonfuls of porridge. You're doing well. A simple phrase, but to him it was a medal pinned to his chest. He nodded, smiled faintly, then tilted his head toward the notebook. She didn't follow his glance. She knew it was there, and she knew she wasn't supposed to know. She left the room. He opened the notebook. Yesterday's word. You stood alone, solitary, like a marker post in an empty field. He added, don't laugh at me. I know this is foolish. He paused, crossed it out, wrote again. I don't know how to say this the right way. Stopped, crossed it out again. At last he wrote, I don't want you to be sad. Period. The ink trailed longer than it should, pulled by the tremor in his hand. He let out a faint smile, words always slower than the heart. Noon. The head nurse called her in. Schedule change. Starting next week, you're no longer assigned to room 207. We're rotating for balance. She took the sheet of paper. Her chest sank like someone had pulled away the peg holding up a tent. Yes. She turned, stepped into the corridor. In the glass wall's reflection, she saw herself, blouse, rumpled hair, undone at the nape, eyes tired. And something else. Something she couldn't quite disguise. Relief laced with disappointment. Relief because the boundary would thicken. Disappointment because one door would close. Night. She entered room 207, as always, calmer this time. Slower, as if trying to memorize every detail for the last time, the position of the chair, the small scratch on the bed frame, the higher pitch of the monitor on its third setting, the stale paper scent from the notebook, the faded silver curtain. He looked at her, long, silent. Neither spoke. Perhaps because words would break everything. She replaced the IV bag, checked the tubing, smoothed the blanket's corner, paused at the bedside. Tomorrow someone else will be checking on you. He nodded. Why rotation? Silence. His lips pressed thin. I understand. She nodded. Rest now. She turned away. He watched. His hand gripped the blanket. Tight. This time tight enough that his nails dug into the fabric. The last night she was assigned to room 207. The air was dry, no rain, barely a breeze. The corridor almost empty. She entered. He was more alert than he had been in days. The bedside lamp cast a golden glow that seemed softer tonight, wrapping gently around them both. She lingered longer than usual. Do you need anything? Yes. She looked up. Paper. Her eyes flicked to the notebook. Not enough, I want to write a letter. She froze. A single beep from the monitor fell into the silence like a pebble, breaking the surface of still water. She nodded. I'll bring more paper. She left. 5 minutes, 10. She returned. A fresh stack of blank pages, white, untouched. She set them on the bedside table. Thank you. Do you need anything else? She lifted her gaze. He shifted, voice breaking into something safer. You leave the light on a little longer. She nodded. All right. She stepped out. The door closed. Inside, he placed his hand on the first page. The pen touched down. Ink spread. He wrote her name. Paused. crossed it out, then wrote, "To the nurse I once loved." His hand trembled, but the words stood, clear, fragile, yet heavy enough to make everything around him still. Outside, she leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to her chest, her heartbeat uneven. She shut her eyes. A cold bead of sweat slid down her spine. She didn't know why her hands were so cold, or why her eyes were wet. Opening them again, she peered through the crack of the door. There he was, head bent, his frail shoulders angled toward the light. His figure looked so delicate as though a stronger gust might break him. She bit her lip. One thought crossed her mind, if only, but she pushed it away. The boundary. Remember the boundary. Dawn. She stepped into the room to collect the tray. He was asleep. The notebook was closed, the stack of paper neatly set aside. She stood at his bedside for a long moment. She wanted to touch the notebook. She shouldn't. She wanted to lean to glimpse a corner of the page. Absolutely not. She wanted to lay her hand over his. Not allowed. So she only pulled the blanket a little higher. Just a little. Then turned away. The door closed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from the head nurse. "Your next shift is in another ward. Get some rest." She typed back yes, slipped the phone away, looked down the long corridor. It felt like walking off a stage she knew by heart, every crack in the floor, every mark on the boards. She didn't know. Behind that door, a letter had begun. He didn't know. Out in the hallway, a heart had just left, leaving behind a hollow no reassignment could fill. Neither of them knew that just one missed beat, only one, would turn everything unspoken into the greatest secret of their lives. Beep, beep, beep. The machine's rhythm stretched thin taut, fragile, ready to snap at any moment. The screen dimmed, the music sank low. His voice barely a whisper, tangled with the hum of the air conditioner. "Will I make it?" A faint click as the bedside lamp flickered out. Darkness. Only folded pages remained lying still, and a question hanging in the air unanswered. Late afternoon. The city had changed after all these years. But the corridor of her old apartment block remained the same, walls peeling paint, the iron staircase speckled with rust. She came home after a long shift, shoulders heavy, her cloth bag dragging at her hand. Her feet ached. When she opened the mailbox at the ground floor amid hospital reports and smeared flyers, there was one thick envelope yellowed with age. Its corner was creased, stained with a faded line of blue ink. On the front, handwriting she knew. Stiff, trembling, as though fighting against time itself. She froze, her heart slammed, breath caught. Her hand trembled as she touched the envelope, touched the letters of her name. Just a name. Simple. But in that handwriting she had not seen in so long. Her chest tightened, the past rushed back. Clutching the envelope to her chest, she hurried upstairs as though afraid someone might steal it. Each stair was a heartbeat. Fast, slow, erratic. The small room opened with a creak of the wooden door. Darkness inside, lit only by the yellow pool of the desk lamp spilling across the table. The clock ticked. Everything seemed to stop except for the envelope in her hands. She sat, hands trembling, heart pounding loud enough to hear. The paper edges were brittle-browned, the seal dry and curled. She raised her finger, paused. Inhale, hold, exhale. Rip! The sound of tearing paper sliced through the stillness. Inside, a neatly folded letter. Yellowed, thin, edges frayed. The smell of old paper rose, tinged with damp. She drew it out, set it on the table. Her eyes fell on the first line, her chest constricted. "If you're reading this, then I am no longer here." Her throat closed. Tears welled but did not fall. She pressed her hand over her mouth, took a deep breath. Read on. "You don't know. Your smile saved my last days. When the medicine burned, when the pain tore through my chest, all I needed was to see you walk in, and I had a reason to breathe for one more day." Her hands shook. The letter quivered with her ragged breaths. "I never dared to say it, afraid to give you more sorrow. I chose silence. But my heart was never silent. Every step you took past me I marked as another heartbeat. Every nod, every faint smile, I carried them to the end." A tear fell, splashed onto the ink, spread into blue blur. She broke down. Her sobs echoed in the small room, the ticking clock her only accompaniment. "I want to say this, though, you never asked to know. You are the one I love. The one I loved until my very last breath." She clutched the letter tight, fell back against the chair. Her body shook, her vision blurred, words dissolving into tears. The clock ticked on. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each line cut like a blade. "I don't ask for anything in return. I only want you to know your existence gave meaning to my life. If one day you feel lost, remember there was once a stranger in his weakest hours who lived because of you, and that will never fade." She collapsed over the desk. Her shoulders trembled. Tears soaked the edge of the paper. In that moment, fragments returned, his eyes gripping the blanket, his thin smile over a spoon of soup. his trembling hand writing in the notebook. All of it rushed back, pressing against her chest. She lifted her head, tears streaking her face. Her lips trembled. She whispered, "Why? Didn't you tell me sooner?" Wind slipped through the window. The lamp flickered. The shadows of the words shimmered alive again. She pressed the letter to her chest, eyes closed. Her heart broken yet warmed as though a thread stretched from present to past, binding her to a soul already gone. Outside, night fell over the city. Distant horns tangled with the ticking clock. The room was left behind, a woman clutching a letter through her tears, a single lamp burning weakly above. But this was only the beginning of the secret he left behind. The piano swelled, then broke into silence. The warm desk lamp spilled yellow light across the wood. The clock's hand ticked steadily, each beat sharp as a sting. She sat motionless. The letter spread before her. Blue ink lines trembled across the page. Paper edges frayed. The faint smell of old paper mixed with the lingering scent of rain outside the window. A tear fell straight onto the word saved. The ink bled, blooming slowly like a dark cloud expanding in silence. She drew a breath. The air seemed to shrink. Her chest ached. The words on the page reached toward her like a hand from the past, gentle, desperate, both at once. Memories snapped open as if someone pressed play. A white hallway, fluorescent lights, the sting of disinfectant. He lay curled, breath uneven. She pulled the blanket up to his chest. Her hand brushed lightly, barely a touch. He gave a small nod as if to say thank you. A spoonful of porridge. A sip of water. The faint ting of metal against porcelain. Her voice softer than breath. "It's all right." His smile thin, weak, but real. Back to the present. She closed her eyes, lids trembling. Another tear slipped, landing on the edge of the letter. "Why did you stay silent?" she asked. No answer. Only the tick, tock, tick, tock, counting time. Wind slipped through the window gap. The lamp flickered. The letters shimmered as if ready to float free from the page. She pressed her palm over the place where the ink had blurred, as though she could hold the words in place. Warm, then cold, then hollow. In her mind, music rose. A violin stretched a single fragile line. A piano followed 3 notes falling like rain. Her heartbeat answered, fast, slow, offbeat. She whispered, "I heard you. I hear you now." Her hand tightened on the page. The paper crackled, brittle in her grip. She lifted her face, eyes red-rimmed with tears. There were still lines left below, still words unread. The camera in her memory slowed, each frame surfacing like photographs developing in a chemical bath. A long night shift. 2:17 a.m. He coughed violently, body heaving. She tilted the bed, pressed his back. The machine shrieked, "Beep, beep, beep." She placed her hand over his firm. "Look at me." He looked, eyes blurred with water. In them both a storm and a fragile beam of light. Her. His breathing steadied, slowly. She drew her hand back, slowly. Each fingertip losing the warmth of his skin, like losing something alive. Another rainy afternoon. Water streaked the glass wall. She drew the curtain to ease the damp. He followed each of her smallest movements. A strand of hair loosened at her nape. Her name tag tilted. She turned, caught his gaze. No smile. No retreat. Only a faint exhale. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll try," he answered, voice raw. Back at the wooden desk, the letter opened further. "I wrote and erased, wrote and erased. I was afraid to give it a name, because names demand, and I never wanted to demand anything of you." She bit her lip. The metallic taste of blood mixed with salt from her tears. "But each night after you left the room dropped 1 degree colder. I understood then. Some things don't need names to prove they are breathing." In her mind, the violin surged faster, sharper. The piano pressed chords deep beneath, as though the ground itself trembled. Memory rewound again. She skipped meals. Retied her hair for the 3rd time, the band stretched loose. White patches of sanitizer on her hands. He slipped the blue elastic band onto his wrist, squeezing it when the pain came. She told him, "When it hurts, squeeze. When you're afraid, call. Will you come? If I'm on shift, I'll come." He smiled. "Then I'll wait for your shift." Her heart now pounded up into her throat, alone in the quiet room. She read on. "If there is another life, I pray I'll still be your patient. Just to see you walk in once more and say, 'It's all right.'" A broken laugh escaped her, half sob, half chuckle, shattering into hiccuped cries. "Fool," she whispered. "Such a fool." The air thickened. The violin slashed suddenly like a blade through silk. The piano struck 2 heavy notes, low and final. She flinched. In her mind, the beep returned, relentless and visible. She rose, walked to the window, drew the curtain. Her shadow stretched across the wall, long and trembling. The city below glittered in broken fragments of light. Cars moved. People passed. No one knew that in this dim room a heart was being opened by a letter. She turned back to the desk, sat down, her hand on the page. Cold. She read, "I meant to speak that night. The night you placed your hand on mine and said, 'I'm here.' But then you pulled away." The boundary returned, and I understood. Her throat burned. The boundary. That invisible thread that cut even as it held. I never wanted to place you in conflict. The only thing I could still give you was peace. Memory flickered in slow motion, her hand pulling back, his eyes following, the blanket wrinkling tight in his grip, knuckles white. The piano dropped notes like falling beads. The violin stretched a single thread across the chasm. She whispered I could have stayed longer. Could have. 2 words hit the desk like lead. On the page, the ink grew darker. A mark where the pen had stabbed down, then wavered upward in a shaky line. Letters bent out of shape. I wrote this during a night of pain. Tears fell onto the paper. The ink blurred. I thought I would not finish. She tilted the page. The stain revealed itself under the lamp's glow, an uneven ring like a wildflower crushed in the rain. Her fingertip traced its outline. Not the center, only the edge, as if circling around an old wound. The music slowed, softer now, fading to a whisper. She inhaled, this time deeper. More words waited below, so many words. She was afraid, but she read. You never knew. Each step you took, I counted. Each time you tied your hair, I felt time loosen its grip. Every time you told me sleep now, I tried. But I couldn't, because I was afraid that if I closed my eyes, I would miss the last chance to see you. Her lips pressed shut, white. Her fingers dug into the edge of the letter. The day I heard you were being reassigned, I knew I was about to lose something. That was when I began to write. To the nurse I once loved. I dared not write your name. Because naming is calling. And calling is demanding. And I promised myself I would demand nothing of you. Another tear fell, striking the word loved. The ink blurred, spreading faintly like a sigh. Memory lurched back the new duty roster, her name pulled away from room 207. Relief. Hollow. Empty. He sat under the lamp, thin shoulders bent toward the paper. She stood outside the door. Not entering. Not daring to enter. Now she opened her desk drawer. Inside lay the blue elastic bands she always used. One still new. One stretched and worn. She lifted the old one, slipped it onto her wrist. Heavy, not from the rubber, from memory clinging to it. The letter went on. If you are reading this, then I am gone. I don't want you to be sad, but if ever you feel empty, place your hand on your chest. Listen to your heart. In it, there was once a beat that ran after you. Her hand rose, pressed lightly to her chest, then harder. Her heartbeat jumbled beneath her palm. The violin thinned into a drifting mist. The piano was almost nothing now, just breath against silence. She folded the letter halfway, not to stop, to breathe. The lamp flickered. Her shadow split in 2 on the wall, then merged again. Wind cut through the crack in the window. Then nothing. Stillness. She opened the letter again, her hand steadier now, her eyes deeper. There is one last thing I want to ask of you. The line broke there. The ink smudged into a long stain, slicing through the letters. She lifted the page closer to the lamp. Unreadable, but along the margin a faint mark, a small line like a sign. She turned the page over. Blank. Her fingers traced the paper's edge where the small mark had been drawn. The sheet felt thicker than usual. Her breath stopped. With her nail, she teased apart the seam. A second layer appeared, thin as cicada wings. Inside, a smaller slip of paper folded in quarters. Old, yellowed, on it only a few lines. The ink was different, darker, steadier, as if written in one rare moment of calm. If you still have this blue elastic band, bring it to where the yellow light falls slant at 6:48. There you'll find what I've left for you. At the bottom, a tiny symbol. Not words, not a room number, a sketch. A fragment of the hospital's layout. The corridor. Room 207, and a window facing a narrow courtyard. Beside it, a single slanted note. On a clear night, the lamp by the fire exit casts a long shadow across the steps. You'll see it. Her heart lurched. The letter wasn't only farewell, it was a guide. 6:48. She looked at the wall clock. The minute hand had just passed 6:29. Her pulse spiked, faster, faster. In her mind, the violin quickened, urgent. The piano struck like footsteps. She shot to her feet. The chair clattered sharp against the floor. She grabbed the letter, stuffed it into her coat pocket, slipped the blue elastic around her wrist. The door burst open. Cold wind slapped her face. The iron stairwell rattled. Her breath fractured. She ran. Her shadow streaked across peeling walls, past the mailboxes, past the iron gate, out into the street. Traffic tangled like a net. Headlights slashed through steam rising from the rain-soaked asphalt. She darted across, heart climbing into her throat. 6:41. The hospital gates loomed closer with every stride. The violin strained to breaking point. The piano hammered, breathless. She reached the fire exit steps. The yellow lamp spilled its beam, slanting long across the tiles. At the edge of the glow, one brick was a different shade, as though it had been lifted before. She dropped to her knees, touched it. Cold, rough. The brick shifted under her hand. Her fingers tightened around the elastic band on her wrist. She drew in a deep breath. 6:47. The wind swept through the corridor, tugging at her hair. She pressed her nail into the edge of the brick, pried gently. The violin cut off. Only her heartbeat remained. 6:48. Click. The brick lifted halfway. Beneath darkness, and something wrapped in oil paper. She swallowed hard. The yellow light slanted into the hollow, glinting faintly. She reached in, and there it was, the last request. The one thing I couldn't ask you, find it. The desk lamp cast its warm glow across the wood. The clock ticked steadily, painfully clear. She sat still, the letter trembling in her hands with every quickened breath. Outside, the rain had cleared. The city lay beneath a pale gray veil. Light filtered cold through the window. She pressed the letter to her chest, eyes shut. Memories surged, flooding back in slow-motion frames, his frail hand clutching the blanket. His trembling gaze, the steady beep echoing in sterile air, that thin smile she once mistook for politeness. Now it all condensed into one undeniable truth. He had loved her. Silently, quietly, until the very end. A tear traced her cheek, but her lips lifted in a soft, sorrowful smile, warm, grateful. She whispered, voice breaking, "Thank you for loving me." The piano swelled slow, deep notes. Then the violin rose, trembling but strong. The camera pulled back, leaving the image of a woman holding a letter to her chest, wrapped in lamplight's amber glow. Facing emptiness, yet somehow it felt complete. But then, she unfolded the smaller slip hidden inside. The shaky lines revealed, "If you still have the blue elastic band, find the place where the yellow light falls slant. I left something for you." Her heart jolted. She stood, breath unsteady, feet flying down the stairwell, the old iron railing shuddering. Her fingers clenched the elastic on her wrist. The city glimmered outside, alive with rushing crowds. She pushed through, heading back toward the hospital. At the fire exit, the lamp cast its beam exactly as described, a golden slant across the steps. She dropped to her knees, pressed her hand against an odd-colored brick. It shifted. Inside a small box wrapped in oil paper. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. Not gold, not relics, but a faded photograph, her in uniform during a night shift. Smiling softly, gaze lowered toward a patient. Blurry, fragile, but clearly he had kept it. Beneath the photo, another note, newer, the handwriting steadier. "If you are reading this, it means I still had time. I left the city for treatment. If you can, find me where the sun rises over the sea. I'll be waiting." Her sob broke open, tangled with laughter. Tears blurred her sight, but her chest burned with light. She ran out into the street, swallowed by the crowd. Small, fragile, but carrying a spark that would not die. The human message. A deep voiceover, trembling with warmth, rose. Some love needs no words. A glance, a small gesture. Enough to leave a mark for life. But some feelings, if left unsaid, become regrets forever. Don't wait until it's too late. Be brave. Speak your heart while you still can. The camera returned to the letter on the desk. A candle flickered, the words shimmering in shadow. A whisper lingered, fading into silence. "And you, will you dare to speak your love before it's too late?" The screen faded to black. A piano note held long, dissolving into quiet. White text appeared. Share your thoughts. Tell us the story you've carried in your heart. And don't forget to comment, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the soul.